Hey YouTube, welcome to the channel. Today we'll be continuing our welcome set tier list series. Today we're going to be going over our neutral cards for the set. Overall, there are some cards that are pretty good in the welcome set as far as neutral cards go, but there are also some cards that are very bad. And in this video, I hope to inform you guys on which cards are relatively okay and which cards are relatively bad. Of course, these are my opinions. If you are more than welcome to disagree or agree depending on like how you feel about a certain card. This is just designed to help new players out, maybe free-to-play players who are trying to make a deck and would like to understand like what makes a card good and what makes a card not good. With that being said, here's the criteria for the set. For the tier list, we have S tier is very powerful, A tier is consistently good but not game breaking, B tier is splashable but not needed, C tier has some potential but inconsistent, D tier is weak, and F tier is absolute hot garbage. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into the cards because we have a lot of cards to cover. First up, we have Volatile Imp. I gave this a B. This card is a 1 mana 2/1 with Afterlife, deal 1 damage to a random enemy creature. It also has another tag. I think the stat line is very underwhelming for 1 mana, especially when you see that the average mana or the average strength and health is 2/2. This card dies pretty easily, especially to hero powers, but the afterlife is pretty decent in my opinion, especially if you play this card on curve. It can help set you up for more beneficial trades later on in the game, which is pretty nice. Overall, I'm giving this a B. It has some potential, it's splashable, but I don't see it being a must include in certain decks. Next up, we have a Dockside Prowler. This is a 1 mana 2/2 hidden for 1 turn. Hidden is a great effect because it unless your opponent has AoE, it almost guarantees that minion will stay alive for the next turn. 1 mana 2/2 is a great average stat line. That's why I'm giving Dockside Prowler a B. It's splashable but not needed. But in aggro decks, this card is pretty good. If I had to like rate it on high B tier or low B tier, this would definitely be high B tier. But yeah, it's a solid card, great in the deck. Next up, we have Springbloom Hunter. This is a 1 mana 2/2 Amazon with regen 1. I like this card too. They're pretty average stats. The only thing is regen gains strength. Regen is better on higher health minions. So essentially for this to benefit from the regen, it basically has to trade into like 1 health minions or 1 strength minions, which isn't bad, but it's also... It could be better, but it's decent at best, which is why I gave it a C. Actually, I'm gonna change this. I'm giving it a B as well. It's a little bit worse than Dockside Prowler, but it's around the same power level as the first two cards. Next up, we have Vanguard Axewoman. This is a 1 mana 2/2 with Blitz. This card is pretty good in my opinion. Blitz is really good. Gods Unchained is a tempo game, so it benefits the attacker, and by being able to attack your first turn or on the turn it's played, means you have the benefit of trading into whatever you need to or whatever is beneficial. It can trade into a bigger minion with 2 health and kill it, or it can trade into a smaller minion, stay alive, and leave a threat on board for your opponent to try to deal with on its next turn. I think it's a pretty good card overall, which is why I'm giving it an A. Next up, we have Wild Hog. It's a 1 mana 2/3 with Confused. I think this card is really good as well. Obviously, Confused is frustrating at times because the card isn't going to attack its intended target 50% of the time. However, I do think that the 1 mana 2/3 stat line is pretty good in terms of like being in an aggro deck, for example. If it attacks face, you're not really going to get mad because it's an aggro deck, and most likely you're going to be want to hit face anyways. So it's a pretty good card in that fact. I don't know if it's good in control, but the stat line pretty much justifies being played at 1 mana. So I'm giving this an A. I think it's a pretty solid card in my opinion. Is it overpowered? No, because of the Confused, but if it didn't have the Confuse and it did have a 2/3, I think this would be a pretty like busted card. But it doesn't, so I digress. Moving on, we have Panacean Messenger. This is a 2-mana 2/3 with Roar. Heal another friendly character for 1. A character or creature? Creature for 1. I gave this card a C. It has some potential for sure, and the 2-mana 2/3 stat line is pretty decent. However, you won't be getting much out of its effect unless for some reason you trade into like you have a minion that could be healed on the next turn. I'm actually going to change this one as well. I actually think it's a little bit higher than C tier. It's B tier, maybe borderline B tier. I think 2-mana 2/3 is a decent stat line, but it's not like amazing. It's not like a skeleton heavy or anything like that. So I'm giving it a B. Yeah, it's good, but it's not like needed. Next up, we have Barricade, which is a 2-mana 1/4 with frontline can attack. I think this card is really weak, in my opinion. Yeah, it has frontline, and it has 4 health, which is pretty good. But it can attack, which means it's a pretty reactive card. Your opponent has ways of dealing with it, probably through a Star Shard Bolt or a Canopy Barrage, or it can just trade with a bigger minion. So you don't have control over what this minion trades into, and that's why it's pretty problematic in my opinion. It is a decent stat line, and if you want to play a more defensive playstyle, I could see you including it in the deck. But to me, I just think it's overall weak. That's why I'm giving it a D. Next up, we have Jailbeast, which is a 3-mana 3/2 Afterlife. Summon a 1/1 Impling. It has another effect as well, which is nice. For 3 mana, you get 4/3 worth of stats, which is nice. However, the Afterlife, leaving an Impling on board, Implings are kind of underwhelming in my experience. But I do see this being played in a token deck, which is why I gave it a B. I'm giving this a B. You didn't see the C there. But yeah, I think it's okay. Is it a must include in decks? No. But is it splashable? Of course. Next up, we have a 3-mana 1/4 Hoplite Initiate. This is with Frontline, and it's an Olympian. I think this card has a decent stat line in my opinion. Unlike Hearthstone though, 4 health at 3 mana is not as good because of removal options such as Canopy Barrage and Star Shard Bolt, which deal 4 damage for 2 mana. However, it is a decent stat line, and if you want to play a more defensive playstyle, you can play this card. 1 strength is pretty underwhelming though, which is why I gave this card a D. We can give it a C. There we go. Cool. Next up, we have Barbed Portcullis. This is a 3-mana 2/4 structure with frontline, but it can attack. It's the same problem with Barricade. It's a very reactive card, and you don't have control over who trades what with it. So yeah, it may stop your opponent from attacking, but it most likely won't be beneficial to you. I'm giving this a D. Bronze Gate, which is a card from the Divine Order, is a 3-mana 2/4 2/3 with one armor. I feel like that card's a little bit better because of the armor. Since this card doesn't have armor though, I think it's pretty weak. So it gets a D. Next up, I have Hunt Warden, which is a 3-mana 3/4. So I think this card, even though 4 health is not as strong as it is in Hearthstone, especially at the 3-mana slot, I think this card is still pretty solid because of the strength it gives. This card can trade into 2-mana minions, 3-mana minions, and sometimes 4-mana minions, which is nice. Also, 4 health makes it like a little bit stickier than your 2-mana minion cost cards. So yeah, I gave this an A. I think it's pretty solid, especially if you're a free-to-play player. You can definitely include this in your deck, and it'll be just fine. Next up, we have Poison Peddler. I gave this card a D. It's a 4-mana 1/3 with Deadly. Deadly is powerful, and the strength, it mitigates the fact that this card has 1 strength, but 3 health is pretty weak, especially for a 4-mana minion. This card trades with 2-mana removal cards, and it trades with 1-mana 2 damage removal cards, and plus a hero power. Pretty weak in my opinion, very underwhelming. That's why I gave it a D. Next up, we have Underbridge Assailant. I gave this card a C. 4 mana, regen 1, 5/3, Amazon tag. The downside with this card is that it has 3 health, which means it trades with unfavorably with a number of cards. The 5 strength is nothing to scoff at though, which I like at 4 mana. If you're running like an aggressive deck that has a more mid-range curve, I could totally see this card being played, especially if you're a free-to-play player. However, there might be better cards at 4 mana, quite frankly. It has some potential, but it's inconsistent overall. Okay, next card is Flamecaller. It's 5 mana, 1/2, but with backline. At the start of your turn, deal 1 damage to each enemy character. It also has a mystic tag. Yeah, I gave this an F. This card is hot garbage. And the reason why, it costs 5 mana, so it's super expensive. The stat line isn't very good, even though you're not the stat line isn't very good. And 2 health is so weak. This card trades with 1 mana removal. So if you play this card and your opponent has like a Vanguard Axewoman, for example, and it trades into this, man, you're screwed. They net so much tempo over you. So yeah, hot garbage. And the fact that this effect procs at the start of your turn means you have to wait a whole turn before you can actually benefit from this card. Yeah, it's just weak overall. That's why I gave it an F. Next up, we have Summoner's Guide. This is a 5 mana 2/5. First time you summon a creature each turn, deal 2 damage to your opponent. I gave this card a D, and the reason why I gave it a D is because it's 5 mana, which is really expensive. 5 health is really good, however. 2 strength is weak, and this effect, first time you summon a creature each turn, deal 2 damage to your opponent. It's very underwhelming, in my opinion. Right, so for this to be effective, for you to proc this right away, you'd have to summon a minion right after, which means if you're playing this card after turn 5, like maybe turn 7 when you have 6 mana, it can be good, but honestly, like 2 damage to your opponent isn't really significant. Yeah, usually if you want to deal damage face, you want to reserve it for like burst options. Like you'd want to deal a lot more damage than just 2 damage. And yeah, I just think this card is overall weak, which is why I'm giving it a D. Let me check my audio real quick. Testing. Cool. Awesome. Funny story, when I was filming this, I actually filmed this video twice, and both times the audio went out. So I went through the whole list and was speaking to myself the entire time. So I had to do a mid-video audio check. Hope y'all can understand. Where are we? Okay, so next up we have Riled Ursine. This is a B. 5 mana, 6/5 is pretty good stat line. Confused, obviously, is not the best. I would love to have maybe switched this to maybe have a 5 mana, 5/6, but I completely understand. Which is why I'm not giving it anything above a B. It has some potential, especially in mid-range decks. Can be used in mid-range nature decks as well. But quite frankly, 5 health at 5 mana is still vulnerable to a Star Shard Bolt plus like a 1 damage hero power. Or a Canopy Barrage plus like the 1 damage nature hero power. So it can be used, but I feel like there are better cards at the 5 mana spot, which is why I give it a B. Next up, we have Echocaster. This is a 6 mana 4/5 with the Ward, Roar, pull a random spell from your void into your hand. I gave this card a C. Yeah, it's splashable for sure. The only thing is it's 6 mana, which means it takes 7 turns to actually play. Ward is good though. I think Ward is a great effect in Gods Unchained, and usually when cards have Ward, they're pretty hard to deal with. 5 mana, 5 health is nothing to scoff at, so it trades pretty well. And it also replaces itself by netting a spell from your void into your hand, which is also pretty nice. I think it's splashable. The only reason why I'm not giving it a B is because it's 6 mana and it takes a while to play. Nice. Next up, we have Hired Muscle. This is your 6 mana 6/5 with Frontline and the Guild tag. I think this card is kind of weak, especially for a 6 mana card. Reason being, because of Gods Unchained mana curve, 6 mana equates to 7 turns, and if I'm playing a card at turn 7, I'd want it to have 7 turns worth of stats, which this card doesn't. Ideally, you'd want 6 mana cards to be like 7/7 or 7/8 or something like that, and that's why this card gets a D, because I think it's pretty weak. And 5 health is pretty weak for a 6 mana minion card. Next up, we have Rotting Mount. This is a 6 mana 6/5 with another tag. Afterlife, summon a 1/1 Impling. I gave it a D as well. It's the same kind of justification that I gave Hired Muscle. 6 mana 6/5 is a weak stat line, even though you do get to summon a 1/1 Impling. 1/1 Implings are very underwhelming and easy to deal with, in my opinion. This card is not worth waiting 7 turns to play. Cool. Next up, we have Anubian Usher. When this creature attacks a god, pull a random creature from your void into your hand. This card is conditionally replaces itself, which is good. It has 8 strength and 6 health. I think 6 health is kind of weak for a 7 mana minion, especially because I'm waiting 9 turns to play this card. Overall, it's pretty weak, which is why I gave it a D. Cool. Next up, we have Juggernewt, which is a 7 mana 6/7 with Blitz and Confuse. I really like this card. It's so cute. Plus the name is pretty awesome. It also has the wild tag, which is good. Blitz is good. Confuse is but the fact that you can play this card and impact the board right away is pretty decent in my opinion. Of course, 7 mana is a drawback because you're waiting 9 turns to play this card, 8 turns if you have a bag of tricks. However, I do think this card has some potential at the very least, which is why I gave it a C. Next up, we have Reckless Flamebreather. This card is an 8 mana, deal 5 damage to each other creature with 5 strength and 5 health. Honestly, I like this card. It's a shame that it's 8 mana because you're waiting 12 turns to play, but it is a pretty good effect. Like you're playing, this is an AoE effect, maybe, or you can possibly wipe your opponent's board and leave a 5/5 minion on board, which is pretty decent in my opinion. Can be used in like ramp decks or any decks that can last 12 turns. However, lasting 12 turns in Gods Unchained is pretty hard, which is why I can't give this anything more than a C. Okay, next up we have Achilean Dedicant. This card is an 8 mana 6/7 with Blitz, Protected, and Ward, and is an Olympian. This card is very good. But I can't give it anything higher than a C. However, Blitz means that it impacts the board right away, which is a plus. Protected and Ward is a solid combination, especially on a big minion, because it makes it so hard to deal with. Yeah, I like this card a lot. I wish I could give it a B. It could get a B, honestly, but 8 mana is still a really long time to play a card, right? I'm waiting 12 turns to play this card, and sometimes some games won't even last 12 turns, which is why I give it a C. And last but not least, we have Apep's Doomcaller. This card is an 8 mana 6/8 frontline afterlife. Each of your creatures gain deadly. This card is very weak in my opinion. 6 mana or 8 mana means you're waiting 12 turns to play this card, and if you draw this card at the beginning of the game, man, that sucks. Frontline is okay, especially with the 8 health, which is nice. And the fact that it has afterlife means that there's a high probability that you'll be able to proc it while you have creatures on the board, which is okay. However, I don't think this card warrants anything higher than a D because of its mana cost. It's just overall a weak card. Maybe if this was 5 costs with weaker stat lines, it could definitely see more play, especially in mid-range decks. But yeah, this card is very bad. And there you have it. We went through all the neutral cards in the welcome set. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe to the channel. Also share the video if you thought it was helpful. Feel free to leave your thoughts and comments down below. And check out the other videos on the channel, we have a whole bunch of tier lists for the welcome cards in War, Death, Deception, Light, Nature, and War, as well as other guides as well. So if you enjoyed the video, thank you very much, and see you guys next time.